No one can save the unwilling. Everything can be lost, except a name. That morning started like any other. Same bitter coffee. Same soft light spilling through the tall window in my office. The kind of light I once believed marked the beginning of a productive day. There was nothing to suggest that the world was about to quietly reject me. I typed in my internal access code. The message appeared instantly. This account no longer has permission. It wasn't a password error. No connectivity issues. Just one clear, quiet sentence. I tried again. Then again. One more time. Some part of me believed that if I insisted enough, reality would realign. But it didn't. My hands began to feel cold. Even the sun outside couldn't warm the doubts settling in. I opened my phone, tried the company account. The banking app refused to authenticate. Checked my personal email. There they were messages from legal, from accounting, from our investment board. All clean, all polished. Not a single mention of Sophia or Richard. And yet the message was unmistakable. Ownership had been transferred. Legally, irreversibly. I reached for my phone again. Alex, our CFO, once promised he wouldn't pull out, no matter the storm. No answer. Helen, one of our earliest backers. Straight to voicemail. I typed a message and deleted it before hitting send. One last resort social media. My profile was still there, still followed, but no new messages, no mentions. The last post was a photo and Sophia on stage at a Chicago conference. Behind us, the Echo logo in brilliant white. We were smiling. I had no idea I was standing at the edge of everything. I sat there in the room that once felt like the core of a living system. The leather chair was still warm. The AC still hummed. The lights still held steady. But none of it felt mine anymore. There was no rage. No dramatic collapse. No cinematic eruption of grief. Only a stillness too deep for emotion to reach. I wasn't sure what I was running anymore, or whether I was still in the game at all. My name still appeared in emails, in Git logs, in shareholder records. But it didn't open anything. It didn't unlock authority. It wasn't a key, just a name, standing alone, on a white background, weightless, and no longer called. Glory doesn't catch those who fall. A few days after losing access, my name vanished from 3 advisory boards. No formal notice, no urgent calls, no explanations, just gone. I found out through an internal memo that made its way around the investment circle. It listed changes in a finance firm I had helped build. My role was replaced by a stranger with the title Senior Strategic Consultant. I didn't know him. He didn't know the systems I created. And clearly, no one cared whether he did. My name wasn't removed because of failure. It wasn't a scandal. It wasn't even personal. I simply wasn't relevant anymore. Not at the center. Not necessary. So I was erased. No one called to ask what had happened. No requests from my side of the story. No one seemed surprised or sad. Everything moved forward, smooth and silent, like I had been replaced long ago. And no one bothered to let me know. The feeling of being erased from a world you helped shape doesn't land like a slap. It arrives like a still room. Even temperature. No sound, No pain, just absence. I used to think failure came with signs. Loud, sharp, messy. But real failure is quiet. It unfolds in meetings you're no longer invited to, in updates you no longer receive, in plans that no longer need your approval. On the wall of our old conference room, there was a photo of me shaking hands with a Japanese tech executive, both of us smiling. A week later, they sent a fax to withdraw from our pilot partnership, indefinitely postponed due to internal changes. The photo came down the week after. My name had once been passed between dev teams, printed in internal briefs, quoted in startup newsletters. Now it wasn't mentioned at all. No memos, no approvals, no strategy invites. I still walked into the office, but no one turned around. It felt like being a ghost in a hallway full of people with places to be. They weren't ignoring me. They just didn't see me anymore. And slowly, I began to believe they were right. Glory doesn't betray. It just forgets. It doesn't know what you sacrificed. It doesn't remember who stayed up when payroll almost didn't go through. It doesn't care who wrote the first line of code. It doesn't leave you. It simply finds someone new. The worst things always start together. At first, I thought losing Echo was the collapse, that the stolen code, the transfer of ownership, the shutout accounts, that was the end. But that was just the beginning. Nothing falls alone. Everything I once called infrastructure, assets, or systems had always been held together by something far more fragile: belief. And once belief disappears, everything else follows. Not because someone breaks it, but because no one tries to hold it up anymore. The first investor sent a typed letter, 2 lines. Due to market volatility, we're withdrawing from the upcoming funding round. Wishing you continued success. Polite, precise. The second stopped returning calls. The third left word with his assistant. He's reassessing his portfolio. Within days, reserve funds were pulled. There was no more money for software licenses, no budget for contract engineers. The dev team stopped submitting reports. Accounting asked whether we'd be continuing with the server provider for the next quarter. They asked quietly, like the answer was already clear. I didn't know what to say. One morning, I walked into the office and the screens were off. No typing, no voices. The place that once buzzed with momentum felt like a graveyard. My lead engineer left a note. I'm stepping away, not because I've lost faith in you, but because I don't know what to believe anymore. I read it twice. Didn't feel angry. Didn't feel anything. It just made sense. Projects were canceled one after another. A printing chain in Chicago paused its rollout uncertainty about ongoing support. A pharmaceutical firm we'd courted quietly pulled from negotiations. My former secretary called me privately. They're saying you're going under. I don't believe them, but I thought you should know. It wasn't shocking. I'd seen it coming. I just couldn't pinpoint when. Then came the banks. First, a request to re-verify assets from last year's expansion loan. Then, a change in credit status. Then, the auditors. Letters asking for proof of ownership. Debt schedules. Documentation I couldn't even remember signing. Back then, I thought I had it all under control. But the company, the systems, the contracts, they all assumed one thing. I'd always be there. The coordinator, the thinker, the one who remembered everything. Without me, the logic collapsed. Nobody knew what to pick up or where to begin. No one could trace the full blueprint. No one understood the architecture. What I once thought was control was actually a trap. I didn't call a meeting, didn't reorganize, didn't resist. Not because I accepted it, but because there was nothing left in me that wanted to fight. It felt like standing in a building as it crumbles, not all at once, but piece by piece. A ceiling tile here, a beam there. No explosions, just gravity. And maybe the scariest thing wasn't watching it all fall. It was realizing I no longer wanted to stop it. Nothing left to hold, and no one noticed I was gone. When I left the apartment, I didn't tell anyone. Not because I was afraid of being stopped, but because I knew no one would ask. I placed the key gently on the wooden ledge by the kitchen. The fridge still had milk, some dry goods in the cupboard. It looked like I might come back, but I wouldn't. I didn't take much. Just a small suitcase, a few shirts, the rest papers, receipts, drawings, bills I left behind. Not because it meant nothing, but because nothing felt worth keeping. The things I wanted to hold on to weren't in those drawers. And whatever had once held me was already gone. No calls, no visitors. No one asked where I was. No messages. It felt less like a disappearance and more like a correction. As if the world had quietly realigned itself, and I had never quite belonged. I rented a room on the edge of town. The kind of place where names didn't matter, so long as rent was paid. The landlord was an older woman who didn't ask questions. She handed me the key, then walked away. I dropped my bag on the floor and sat on the bed without turning on the light. The window let in a thin stream of glow from the street lamp outside, just enough to see the peeling paint on the walls and a water stain slowly spreading across the ceiling. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't a place. Just somewhere to be. If being still counted as living. That first night, I lay there for hours without sleeping. No thoughts, no dreams, no flashbacks, just stillness, like an object unclaimed by time. Strangely, what came to mind weren't memories of friends or lovers, but boardrooms, investor meetings, slide decks, growth charts, people leaning forward, asking questions, nodding, taking notes. No one asked for those slides now. No one called for my thoughts on market trends, not because someone replaced me, but because there was nothing missing to begin with. No one notices when a name vanishes. If that name no longer adds value, maybe they thought I was still working on a new product or taking a break somewhere after too much success. No one could imagine that the man once called Austin's brightest was now curled in a corner of a cheap room, watching water drip from a cracked ceiling, with no plans for tomorrow. The longer I stayed invisible, the less I felt like someone. No one called my name. No one challenged or agreed. No one healed. No one heard. It felt like dying, only slower, and without a certificate to prove it. When you become your own cruelest judge, no one needed to accuse me. No one had to point fingers. I did it all myself, over and over, day after day, until every part of me believed I deserved everything I'd lost. At night, in that small room, I'd face the wall and whisper questions like prayer. Why didn't I listen to my gut? Why did I trust her? Why didn't I keep a backup of the code? Why was I so stupid? Each question ended in silence. No answer. No voice to say, "You didn't deserve this." And eventually, I stopped hoping anyone would. Days passed without shape. No work. No emails. No meetings. I was no one. No role. No purpose. No reason to perform. Just a man in a room, watching sunlight crawl across the warped wooden floor until it disappeared. I no longer felt angry at Sophia. I didn't blame Richard. I didn't curse the investors. They did what made sense to them. The only person I couldn't forgive was me. The worst feeling wasn't the loss. It was knowing I'd seen it coming and did nothing. The signs had been there. The way she avoided certain questions. The way Richard called at odd hours. The subtle edits in the documents. I noticed. I felt it. But I looked away. Because I didn't want to break something that looked perfect. Because I wanted to believe I was safe. The truth is, I wasn't betrayed. I handed everything over and hoped no one would take it. The sweet arrogance of thinking I was untouchable. The fatal naivety of believing control meant invincibility. That's what really broke me. Not being fooled, but knowing I had fooled myself. Every time I looked in the mirror, on the rare days I could, I didn't see Victor Dominic. I saw a man who had once understood risk better than anyone and walked straight into it. A man who taught others to question everything, but couldn't question his own illusion. Others might forgive me, but the sentence I passed on myself came with no appeal. The real loss isn't what's gone, but not knowing who you are. Some mornings, I'd stare into the mirror and not recognize the man looking back. Gone was the founder. Gone was the sharp-eyed strategist. Just a stranger with uneven stubble, dry skin from sleepless nights, and eyes that didn't seem to want to open fully. I used to believe identity came from within, but it washes off easier than I thought. Take away the company, the project, the plan, and what's left blurs like ink on wet paper. No more folding the blanket in the morning. No more checking the calendar. No more turning on the desk lamp. There was no reason. No meetings. No expectations. No one waiting. The day stretched like a silent void between two failed attempts at sleep. Without a product to build. Without a company to name. Without the next quarter's funding goal. I didn't know who I was. Everything I thought was core was maybe just costume. Tech savvy? Maybe. But tech moves on. Strategic? Possibly. But who needs it now? A leader? If no one follows, am I still leading? No comparisons. No feedback. No reflection. It felt like drifting outside the current, not pushed, not anchored, just not belonging. I don't remember the last time I smiled, in a way that felt real. Not the forced, polite kind, but the kind that lightens the chest. Lately, the only smiles were faint smirks, at memories that feel like fiction, as if to ask, how did someone who stood there end up here? One afternoon, I shaved after weeks of letting it go. Stared into the mirror, trying to find the fire that once lit up my face. On stage, presenting Echo. searched for belief, for clarity, for a flicker of what remained, found nothing, just exhaustion and dimness, as if the real me had walked away. The moment my name faded from print, maybe the real loss isn't in what left, it's in what stayed behind and no longer knows who it is. Vanishing in the crowd without anyone erase you. I stayed in San Francisco, didn't leave, didn't go home, didn't try another city, just stopped showing up. No one knew I was still here, and I didn't want them to. I wandered streets tied to old meetings, cafes where contracts were first signed, offices I used to enter in crisp suits. Now, I walked past unnoticed, just another hollow face in a rushing crowd. I'd once stood on tech conference stages, joined closed-door sessions with investors, been the name assistants filtered dozens of calls for. Now, no one asked where I was, not because I was erased, but because no one needed to remember. I slept in churches, sometimes on park benches, once on the floor of an empty train station. No one asked. No one looked. I wasn't begging, wasn't talking, wasn't trying. Just looking for a place to sit, a shadowed corner, a silence I could disappear into. One day, I saw an old poster at a bus stop with the logo of the company I founded. Rain had torn its edges. Half the image was gone. I stared at it a while, as if waiting for someone else to recognize it. No one did. So I kept walking. Not bitter, just certain. To strangers, I was just another drifter. To old colleagues, I was no longer on the map of relevance. And to myself, there was no reason to be seen anymore. No one chased me out. No one removed me. I just stood still long enough for the world to move on. When you turn away the only hand that could save you, no one forced me to stay down, but no one reached more than 3 times. There were hands once offered, polite, sincere, even worried. An old friend and engineer from my early Austin days found me after hearing what happened. He brought some cash, an address where I could stay. I refused, not out of pride, but because I didn't believe I deserved it. When you can't recognize yourself anymore, help feels like light that burns. It doesn't warm you. It blinds you. It shows you what you've lost. People asked, why not just take the help? Get back up? But to get up, you first have to believe there's a reason to. And I didn't. I told them, I'm fine. The easiest lie. And the biggest one, no one's fine. Sleeping curled under wet eaves, no one's fine. Avoiding their own reflection in the glass of a diner window, no one's fine. When they no longer feel worthy of a name. A stranger, a middle-aged woman from a local shelter, noticed me at the bus stop one afternoon. She sat beside me without asking much, said, if you need anything, I'll be here again around this time tomorrow. I nodded. The next day, I didn't return. Not because I hated kindness, but because I feared it. Feared that accepting it meant becoming someone again, facing myself, living again, and I wasn't sure I had it in me to live. Every time someone left a sandwich, a crumpled bill, or a concerned look, I turned away. Didn't want it. Didn't take it. Didn't want to be helped. Because somehow, that felt worse than being forgotten. Help, to me, wasn't saving. It was a mirror. It said, "You used to be strong, and now you're not." The more kindness I saw, the deeper I withdrew. The more people reached out, the more I believed I didn't deserve to be reached. No one dragged me down. I stayed there because it felt like the only place I had permission to be. Knowing you've hit bottom, but still not wanting to rise. There was no moment that officially marked rock bottom. No bang, no light, no announcement. Just one rainy night, sitting in a stairwell of an old apartment block, shoes soaked, the smell of mildew in the air, and a strange thought circling in my head: how long have I been here? No one saw me. No one asked. No one called. And worst of all, I no longer hoped anyone would. I knew this was the bottom. Not because of the cold, not because of hunger, but because my mind had stopped moving. Every instinct to resist, every urge to survive, had quietly backed away. No more anger, no more sadness, no more dreams, just a quiet acceptance. This is who I am now, and this is the life I have. It's not that I didn't know there was a way out. I just didn't care to find it. I've heard people say, hitting rock bottom helps you bounce back. But no one talks about the ones who hit bottom and just stay. Not because they can't, but because they no longer see a reason to rise. I didn't think about the future, didn't revisit the past, didn't think at all. Just moved through hours and nights like a ghost that no longer needs light. No panic, no pain, just drift. I used to dream of writing a book, teaching, giving back, running free workshops for young coders, telling my story someday. But now, I couldn't write a single sentence. I used to always have something to say. Now, every word died in my throat before it could reach my mouth. Hitting bottom isn't terrifying. What's terrifying is getting used to it, getting used to the silence, to not being called, to not being anyone. And when that becomes normal, rising up doesn't even cross your mind. When everything is dark and you're not sure it's over, there was no bell to mark the end of this chapter. No flicker at the tunnel's edge. No dreams returned in the long, cold nights. Only darkness. Not the kind that surrounds you, but the kind that starts inside. A dense, wordless fog with no direction and no end. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't care anymore. Each day passed like it wasn't part of time. No calendar, no milestones. Nothing happened, and yet everything was slipping away. I wasn't scared, but I didn't want to live. I didn't plan to end it, but I didn't see a reason to begin again either. Just waiting. Waiting for what? I didn't know. Maybe for something to shift, or for myself to disappear completely, without trace, without noise. One night, I saw something scratched into the concrete wall of a train tunnel. We don't die from the wounds. We die thinking no one sees us bleed. I stopped, stared, didn't cry, just agreed. I had once been everything. Now I was nothing. Not because someone took it, but because I stopped believing I deserved to keep any of it. There were no codes in my head anymore, no ideas, no sentences, only blank space. I wrote something on the edge of an old train ticket. I don't remember what. Maybe my name, maybe a lost piece of memory. Then I tore it up, let it fall on the track, stood there a while, then turned away. No decision, no destination, no promise, just one step and then another into the night, not knowing if this was the end or the beginning of something darker still.
I once asked him, back then, was there anyone you could have called? He just shook his head and said quietly, there was. But I didn't feel like I deserved to hear anyone call me dad or friend or even just you. Not at that time. That answer wasn't a cry for pity. It was a quiet truth. The kind that echoes under frozen water, where all sound is held still by silence. I couldn't imagine how someone who once had everything could disappear from the world without anyone noticing. But he lived that way. Not for a week. Not a month. A long time. Long enough to forget there had ever been a man named Victor Dominic. Nothing collapses in a single moment. What drowns a person is the slow silence, when they no longer believe they deserve anything. Not a meal. Not a question. Not even light. He never used the word depression, but every story he told was a definition of it. As far as I know, he didn't try to end his life, but he also wasn't really living. Each day passed like a quiet statement. I still exist, even if no one needs to know. There was something he once wrote then tore up. Sometimes, what keeps a person alive isn't hope. It's curiosity. How much deeper can this fall go? Maybe he'd hit bottom. Or maybe it was just one more floor, in a pit that had no end. Hello everyone, I'm Lily, the youngest daughter of Victor Dominic. My father shared these stories, not to be remembered, but to remind us. Everyone deserves a new beginning, even the broken ones. Some names and places have been changed for privacy, but Free Your Soul is real, and it's the most precious legacy he left us. Today, I'm sharing it with you, hoping it reaches someone who needs a quiet, gentle whisper. Thank you for listening with your heart. I'll see you in the next stories.